Nope, don't want to see it again, right? Okay, good evening, everybody. I guess Linda's taking a little time to join. Hopefully everybody's doing well. Before we get started, since they're going to see this, I would like to say hello to a couple of new friends. I recently met Kate Lorenzetti Bradley, who lives in Hilliard, and she and her husband are clinical biologists, and they have been watching the programs on YouTube. And she said they really enjoy them. Their favorite was the one we did a few weeks ago on parasites. And so hello, Kate, and hello to your hubby, and we hope you continue to watch. So this week, as the video said, we have a program on aquatic plants, which hopefully is interesting to you. And we have a little surprise after that. And this is a bit lengthy, so we will go ahead and dive in. Well, what went on there? And I don't know where my pictures are. Hopefully they're not all missing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to close this out and start over.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I will. Technical difficulties. There we go. There it is. Except I didn't do share. Let's see. We're all messed up here. Okay. Share. Share. From beginning.
Did Linda?
I think she's on. You there, Linda?
What?
You there, Linda? Linda Ray, are you on now? Doesn't look like it. Said joining. Maybe it's just taking her a while.
She's not in the waiting room again?
I don't know. Let me look and see.
Sorry about that.
All right, what's going on here? She disappeared. She disappeared. She'll probably try and get back on. I will be able to admit her when she does. I'm going to go ahead and start again. All right. Okay. So freshwater aquatic plants. And I think there will probably be some surprises in here. There is a whole world of plant life above and below the surface of our lakes and our ponds, rivers, and streams. And these plants are a mix of native, uh, invasives, and non-natives that are not invasive. Some of the plants are small, while others are these huge sprawling mats that cause us problems. Some are wild, which are the native ones, and others were introduced either accidentally or intentionally, as you will see. Now, normally, aquatic plants are important to the ecosystem. They contribute, at least the native ones do, by providing cover for fish, shellfish, macroinvertebrates, which you will remember are mostly larvae of terrestrials like the mayflies and the caddisflies, the odonatas, the dragonflies, damselflies, also things like the water penny larva, the little pocket snails, and so on, and also other aquatic species, such as crayfish. The plant detritus, meaning dead pieces of the plants, are food for crayfish and macroinvertebrates. The plants help oxygenate the water and filter and purify it. And also they secure the bottom and the shore gravel, rocks, and soil, so that we don't lose that. So they do quite a bit. And here are a couple of examples of what that looks like, what they do within the ecosystem. So you can see the role they play. And here are a couple more examples where you can see above and below the water. A couple of different types of areas. Here's now Linda is waiting, and we will let her in. Are you there, Linda? Might take a minute. You there, Linda? I'm sure she will be on shortly. Now, much like algae, many of the invasive water plants are controlled through chemicals. For some of the species, the chemicals have to be applied repeatedly, sometimes year after year. We've, at least Christy and I have seen that happen in the ponds and the lakes in the state parks and in the metro parks. And for other plants, instead of using chemicals, mechanical methods are used in the form of harvesters, shredders, and floating brooms. And I'm going to show you what those things look like. On the upper left here, we have an aquatic plant shredder. And a little hard to tell here, but this thing does float and moves around in the water. So you got two more people. Okay. Linda and Linda joining.
Oh, I see Linda's connecting now. Great.
Yep.
Yay.
Yeah. And what happens with the aquatic plant shredder is it shreds the invasives into little tiny pieces, and they are left on the water. They eventually sink to the bottom where they become the detritus that the macroinvertebrates and creatures like bottom feeding fish and crayfish rely on them for food. So that's one thing that happens. Then in the case of the aquatic plant harvester, that actually brings those up from the chute you see on the front there, which is like a big conveyor. And then they go on to that back area that you see there. And the plants are actually brought up on shore, and in most cases they are used for fertilizer in fields. And then the same thing with the floating broom on the bottom. It attaches to the front of a boat, and the plants that are on the surface are swept up and into the boat, and same thing, they end up being used in fields for fertilizer. So a couple different methods there. So now what we're going to take a look at next is the most common aquatic plant species found in Ohio. And as you will see, some are beneficial and desirable, and quite a few others are not. So first, in part, cattails, and there are about 30 species of our native cattails. Everybody knows what they look like, and they're in temperate and cold regions. They live in fresh to slightly brackish waters. They are aquatic to semi-aquatic, and they are important to wildlife as cover and food. Animals such as muskrats, crayfish, and aquatic insect eat cattails, and they also provide a place to lay eggs for many species. A lot of your herps like to lay eggs around them, frogs, salamanders, newts, and so on. And they have tiny flowers that are unisex, and they grow from the spikes at the top of the brown cattail. And they release their pollen, and then the male flowers at the top wither and fall off, and they leave that furry fluff that we see on the spikes. And then when they mature, the spikes disintegrate and they release those cottony masses that we see. And that is the seeds that get dispersed in the wind, and that's how they propagate. Now, along with that, probably didn't know this, there is a narrow-leafed cattail, which is an introduced species, and it also hybridizes with the common cattail. And the narrow leaf and the hybridized are both invasive. They look very similar. They have the same kind of flower spikes, but there is no gap between the flowers on the native cattail, but these have a gap. Below ground, they have these starchy rhizomes, which are basically the roots, and they anchor the plant to the soil, and they become intertwined and form these very dense mats, which choke out anything else. And due to that, they choke out the native cattails, so their frequency and distribution is shrinking because of that. And these are mainly the ones that you see along expressways, in artificial ditches, shallow ponds, and at the edge of calm waters, and in damp patches of rural and suburban yards, and in marshes, and in brackish and polluted waters that will have a depth nearing 3 feet. So these are not good ones. And it's kind of hard to stop the fact that the narrow-leafed hybridizes with the common cattail, the native ones. And they're, to most people, it's hard for them to tell the difference. But you can see in this photo here, the narrow-leafed and the hybridized ones, the spikes are very much longer than they are on our native common cattails, a lot longer. Now the next one, this is the native water milfoil. And this is a very good plant. It produces oxygen for aquatic wildlife, improves water quality, and is not likely to become a problem that the invasive Eurasian water milfoil is, which is very widespread and spreads very rapidly. This is a native species, but it's listed as endangered and actually has not been recorded in 20 years. If you happen to see this someplace, it is asked that you report it to the ODNR at 1-800-WILDLIFE or to their website, wildinfo@dnr.ohio.gov, because they are very interested to know if there is any of this around, because it's been a very long time since it's been recorded in the wild. And you can tell from that very spiky, bright purple flower. Any questions on that? Okay, great. Next, Eurasian water milfoil. This is highly invasive and is the most common aquatic plant in Ohio. It's native actually to Europe, Asia, and North Africa, but it is widespread in about 57 countries, from Canada to South Africa, and it was introduced here by accident in the 1940s. It is a submerged plant, and it grows in still and slow-moving water. It has these slender stems that you see here that grow up to 8.2 feet long. They crowd out native plants, and they create these microhabitats for tiny fish and macroinvertebrates, while at the same time they crowd out large fish, so it disrupts the ecosystem and the normal feeding patterns. The large fish, prey on tiny fish, and they can't get to them with these huge thick mats of this stuff. It grows very thick. It grows close to the surface in a lot of cases, and it blocks out the sun, which we're going to talk more about. It disrupts the oxygen levels in the water, the temperatures, which affects the thermocline, which we're going to talk about. And it has a severe negative impact on all aquatic life wherever it grows. And it can and usually is controlled with chemical treatment. So to talk about thermocline, what that is and what it does and how this plant and others like it affect it. The thermocline is a layer within a body of water where the temperature and oxygen concentration is ideal for fish and other aquatic creatures. And it is a layer that rises and lowers with the seasons and climate changes. It's dependent upon weather and atmospheric factors like sunlight, air temperatures, wind in the way that it affects air and water temperatures, and precipitation and the way it affects water temperatures. And fish stay in the thermocline and they move their feeding range with it. And as the diagram shows here, the thermocline moves closer to the surface in the warmer weather, and it lowers actually during the colder weather. And so the fish raise their range and lower their range during the year with that. And what also raises and lowers with that is something called the epipelagic zone. And that is the area where there is enough sunlight and oxygen below the surface to support the growth of algae, which actually is important because zooplankton and a lot of your macroinvertebrates do feed on algae. Any questions on that? So that's obviously very important. And what happens with these plants that grow in huge mats like that Eurasian milfoil is that they block out the sunlight because they grow in these big mats near the surface over large areas. They cause the temperatures to decrease. They cause a decrease in oxygen in the water below them. And that creates these dead zones, like you see here, where creatures, aquatic creatures can't live. And what does that do? It creates fish kills, and it creates kills of other aquatic creatures as well, and it causes other aquatic plants to die off also. So it's obviously not a good thing. It's not something you want. And that's why in a lot of places it is aggressively dealt with through chemicals or through those three types of machines, the harvesting machines that we looked at. Any questions on any of that so far? No? Okay, great. To continue, Another one of our plants, and this is a native, is Pickerel cordata, otherwise known as pickerel weed. And it's a vigorous perennial, kind of a pretty plant. Almost looks like hostas in a way. They grow to 2 to 4 feet tall, and it grows in quiet waters and streams and ponds, from Nova Scotia all the way down to Florida and Texas. Grows in dense colonies. It has glossy, narrow, arrowhead-shaped leaves that grow to 10 inches long with rounded bases. And as you can see here, well above the surface of the water. And then it has these bright blue spikes of flowers that are densely packed on these stems. They flower from June to October, and they produce these starchy seeds with toothed ridges. And after the bloom, the spikes droop and they release the seeds into the water. So that is how they propagate. And dragonflies and damselflies, you'll see them around these a lot because they quite often lay their eggs on those plant stems. And fish, especially chain pickerel, like to shelter in clumps of these plants, which is how they got the name pickerel weed. So this is a native. It's a good one. Now, another native is the variegated water celery, which, because of that pink you see there on the fringes, is also called the flamingo plant. This is a pond plant, and it's got the pink and cream margins on the outsides of these green variegated leaves that you see, and the color intensifies in the fall. Now, interesting enough, these are a member of the carrot family. They spread kind of low around the margins of ponds. They are related to the water parsley, which is a cousin, but they are less aggressive. The water parsley is very fast spreading. They look very similar to this, except that they do not get those pink edges. Next, very invasive, and we have a lot of this also, the lesser naiad. It is an annual aquatic plant. It has highly branched stems that grow to 4 feet in length, and they break off easily, which is a good thing in terms of using those harvesting machines on them. The leaves are coarsely toothed. They get small flowers that grow in clusters on the axils of the leaves, the ends of the leaves. They are easily, as you will see, confused with our native coontail, but the leaf arrangement is different, and that's how you can tell. The coontails have 4 to 5 whorls instead of this arrangement that you see here that's more almost like a starburst pattern. These are native to Asia and Africa. They were first found in the United States in the 1930s, but they were likely introduced here through bilge tanks of international ships in the mid-1800s. And they are widespread in Ohio, most common in rivers and alkaline lakes. And they often share waters with invasive species like the Eurasian milfoil. Another invasive is curly pondweed. And it has, like you see in the picture here, these curly oblong leaves that are arranged alternately on the stem. And we got a really good picture here. The leaves are wavy. They almost look like lasagna noodles, and have these little tiny teeth along the entire length of the leaves. The leaves stay submerged in the stems, but they have these flower spikes that come up out of the water, as you see in the drawing here. And the fruit that comes up out of the flowers is flat with they call it a beak, a pointed beak. They came also from Africa, Asia, Australia, and Europe. And again, likely introduced to the US from the bilge tanks in international ships in the mid 1800s. And they are also widely distributed in Ohio. They grow in fresh and slightly brackish water, but have also been found to grow in shallow, deep, still, or flowing water. And it, like some of the others, occurs with other non-native invasive species. Now, look at something that's not invasive, water lilies. And there's a lot of these around. Now, they are a family of about 60 species in 4 genera of freshwater flowering plants, which are native to temperate, which is us, and tropical parts of the world. They are non-native to Ohio, but they are also not invasive. They provide food for fish and wildlife, but sometimes they cause drainage problems where they grow because they grow so rapidly. And I think everybody knows what these look like. They have these long stalks that contain a lot of air spaces, and they float in quiet freshwater habitats. The stalks come up from these underwater stems that are buried in the mud, and they have these very fragrant solitary flowers that show either at or above the water surface. And they have this cup-like flower that has the spiral arrangement of petals. And think back to when we have talked about pie, and we've talked about the Fibonacci rule, and that's the way the leaves are arranged in a spiral around the center. And actually the pollen and seeds in the center are arranged that way also. And to continue, the flowers of most of those have many stamens, as you see here, the yellow inside the pink. Some of the species only open in the morning or only open in the evening, and that's to attract specific insect pollinators. The fruit is nut-like or berry-like, and most of the time they ripen underwater, and they ripen until they rupture or decay, and then the seeds float away underwater or sink. And that's how they propagate. And some species as well, the leaves are actually submerged. They don't float on top of the water. They are native members of a family that are perennial, and there are 74 species of those. And here's a pretty good diagram on the right. You see that's what an individual seed looks like. And then right below that is, I don't have an arrow at it, but that's what a seed looks like from inside. On the left, you see that is what the fruit looks like from the outside. And again, that is on the stalk underneath the flower. On the right, there's an inside view of the fruit, and all those little dots you see in there, that's the seeds. And then below that is a top view of the fruit, and those little teardrop things you see, those are the little capsules inside the fruit of the seeds. And then on the left there is the rhizome or root of the plant, and that's what each seed, when it settles to the bottom, that is what it turns into, and that's what anchors the plant. And that's how a new plant starts. Now, to throw you off a little bit, the lotus plant, they're different. These plants and water lilies are different species, although they are very similar. The main difference is that the flowers and leaves of the water lily grow on the surface for the most part, while the leaves and flowers of the lotus grow above the water. The lotus grows up to 6 feet tall, while the water lily is only 8 inches tall. The lotus has no variegated varieties as that does the water lily, like this is a water lily here on the right. You can see that's got variegated leaf petals. So 2 different plants. And as you can see now on the left, this is a lotus flower, and the leaves have or the petals of the flower have a very different shape as compared to the water lily on the left. The leaves on the lotus are much broader, and they're a very different, the petals are a very different shape. Lotus flowers, I just threw this in because I think this is interesting. Lotus flowers are the most prominent tokens in Eastern cultures. In Hinduism and Buddhism, they're considered the most sacred flower. Statues of Buddhist monks often include a lotus flower. And hieroglyphics from ancient Egypt show this flower alongside priests and pharaohs. In the Buddhist religion, the flower is a symbol denoting, quote, the essence of enlightenment for those who have meditated and will meditate on the profound law, meaning the writings of Siddhartha Buddha. So next, coontail, which is native, and they are found all over the US. The plant grows completely underwater, and there are up to 12 leaves on a whorl, which each of those stems there you see is a whorl. The leaves are straight and flat, variable in length. They're about 0.6 inches long. The stems can be up to 11.4 feet long. The branches are large, brittle masses, sometimes cord-like and flexible, so they break off easily. The seeds are elliptical. They're smooth. They're very tightly packed. Only about 0.1 to 0.2 inches long. And these are in the quiet waters of lakes, ponds, and sometimes slow streams. And these are important because to the ecosystem, the fruits, the seeds are eaten by ducks and is considered a good wildlife food. And it also provides habitat for micro and macro invertebrates. And then those obviously are in turn used as food by fish and other wildlife species. The macroinvertebrates, minnows and crayfish and scuds, they all eat macroinvertebrates. So that's why they're important in the chain. And then after these plants die, their decomposition by bacteria and fungi provides food as well. So not just the seeds, the actual detritus of the plants provides food. Now, the one probably people are most familiar with, which is highly invasive, hydrilla. It was brought, it's called naturalized, was brought into the US in the 1950s and 60s from aquariums into waterways in Florida and spread from there. And this was because it was a popular aquarium plant and it spread through the country from there. Now, it's been found that it has medicinal uses. It can be used in the manufacture of certain drugs, but that aside, it's very aggressive, spreads very rapidly, and competitive nature, meaning that it very easily and quickly chokes out any other aquatic plants around it. And it also does that business of turning the thermoclines into dead zones. So they cause economic, environmental, and ecological damage. It causes the displacement of native species like pond weeds and eelgrass, which are important to the ecology of waterways. And on top of that, it produces and releases into the water a neurotoxin, which causes something called avian vascular myelopathy, which is a fatal brain wasting disease of waterfowls and raptors. So this is just, it's horrible stuff. It is the worst invasive we have, and it is the most widespread, unfortunately, throughout the country of any of the invasives, which is probably why it's the most well-known. And it is, more than any of the others, mostly treated with chemicals, and it's usually one that has to be treated year after year after year with chemicals. Now, also invasive, my word at the top is cut off. I can't see what this says now. Anybody else see that?
Pondweed.
Oh, it's pony leaf pondweed or something to that effect. This is invasive. It's a perennial submerged aquatic herb that's native to Eurasia. It tolerates fresh or slightly brackish water and will grow in shallow, deep, still, or flowing water. So it'll grow in a lot of different places. It invades freshwater lakes, ponds, rivers, streams, pretty much anywhere. It becomes dominant due to its tolerance for low light and low water temperatures, which a lot of the others do not. It will outcompete other underwater plants because of that, and causes problems because of its formation of dense mats, which more so than the other ones, besides interfering with thermocline, also interferes with recreational activities. This one's notorious for fouling the paddles of people's canoes and kayaks, fouling the rudders and the propellers on boats. You can very quickly with those things get such a huge bunch wrapped around it that it just takes an hour or more to get it unfouled. It also causes an increase in phosphorus concentrations, which is like gasoline on the fire in terms of increasing algae blooms. And it also tends to pile up, creates big piles of its own self in these big dying mats along the shores, which creates a nuisance. So not a good one. And now our last one, and this one's a native, and it's a good plant, the yellow bladderwort. And this one, it floats submerged under the water's surface, but it has these yellow flowers that come up above the surface. And this one's an interesting one. Its stems wrap themselves around other submerged objects in the water. It'll wrap itself around other plants, around sunken wood, logs, around rocks, whatever. And here's the interesting thing. Now, they are carnivorous. They've got within their flower an elaborate bladder trap that's in tiny insects and nematodes, which nematodes are tiny aquatic worms, and that makes up most of their diet. But they also get nutrients from photosynthesis. It's been found on every continent except for Antarctica, and researchers love these things because the fact that they are both carnivorous and photosynthesize, it makes them very unusual and biologically complex. There is no other plant anywhere that is both carnivorous and goes through the process of photosynthesis for nutrients and energy. It's the only one. And that's a very distinctive yellow flower. Any questions? Okay, well, it's time for that. If you have any questions on anything in the presentation, anybody have anything? No? Good presentation, bad presentation? Ooh, nobody wants to say, huh?
I was having trouble unmuting. Hydrilla, I studied and it moved up from the south, as you had said, from aquarium releases. And it's
Yeah,
a really big problem in the Potomac River. When I worked for Congress, I worked on a bill that specifically aimed for Northern Virginia and DC and Maryland on the Potomac there. It was clogging up a lot of the water inlets and causing a lot of problems. We would have algae blooms there anyway, the blue-green algae blooms. It's choking out oxygen. It in the south, it's really bad. It just knots it up. Bad for the boats, bad for game fishermen. And I
yeah,
remember when we were doing the bill, one of the comments was it self-propagates. I think it's 6 ways or 5 ways. Lots of ways that can reproduce. That's why it's such an invasive menace. And it does have the poisonous qualities. It's bad stuff.
yeah, yeah. It's harder to control than white clover in your yard, you know?
And I did
Really
not
is.
realize it was in Ohio yet. I didn't see that in my book. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's been spreading it from the south. Yeah.
It's pretty much at this point in every state in the country.
Mm, mm, mm.
I thought it was a good presentation. I knew a lot of these things when I had my pond
Uh-huh.
and would have been interested in knowing more about a lot of this. But since I don't have the pond anymore,
Right. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to stop the share at this point. And let's see. It's 8:58. I am going to do one thing here real quick. We had talked in our roundtable last week a little bit about doing some virtual hikes. And I wanted to just share a couple minutes of one that I started putting together last week. So you could kind of see what we have in mind. I've gotta find this and pull it up now. Take me just a second here. Just so you can kind of get a flavor of what we're talking about doing here. Okay, so I am going to do a share again. And holler out if you can't see this. Can everybody see it?
yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. This is Don Kloss here for Central Ohio Nature. I am live at the O'Shaughnessy Nature Preserve in Shawnee Hills. I am in the east parking lot right off of Dublin Road. If you're heading north on Dublin Road, this is the parking lot on the right. It's a rather small parking lot that is pretty much only used by people that are coming here to fish. And I want to show you something this afternoon that's interesting. A lot of people don't know about it. For point of reference, this is Friday afternoon, about 3:30 on September 30th, Friday afternoon. So I am at the edge of the parking lot here, and off to the right of the parking lot is a wooded area, and there are a few trails going off into the woods. not well maintained, unfortunately. This is owned and operated by Columbus Parks and Recreation. We're going to go down one of these trails. This is what I want you to see. Leaving the parking lot, we're going to take this narrow trail here. And I will point out, although I probably don't need to, this property has a lot of trees in it. Not too old, any of them really, but they're pretty tall, a lot of them. And we have a lot of understory here. A lot of different plants. It is a mix of native plants and also, unfortunately, invasives. And this part of the trail runs along the East Lake. I don't know if we'll see any this afternoon, but I have seen quite a few deer in this area in the past. We have a pretty high water level today based on rains that we've had recently. This is a little cove, and we are actually going to go around this. Fast forward it a bit. Deer. Somewhat of a clearing where we have less understory, more tall trees, and here we are. We have this lovely ravine that most people do not even know is here. I'm now in the bottom of the ravine. The sides rise up between about 15 to 20 feet on average. And the bottom of the ravine is dry right now. It is rocky. Various different types of rock are in the ravine. Everything from gravel to boulders. Some of the boulders are even erratics. I will end our little journey to the O'Shaughnessy Nature Preserve ravine at this point here. I hope you have enjoyed this little virtual hike. And I'll stop share there. So that's kind of what we're looking at doing with these virtual hikes. It's just a little taste of what we have had in mind.